Motion. Why you even look back?
Oh, sorry.
You're supposed to look at me.
She feeling emotions. You feeling emotion. She wish she could. She wish she would. And now they're feeling emotion. It's like I'm emotion. I knew I could. I knew I would. And now we up, blowing cash, living fast, making emotion. She's emotional. She's emotional. She's emotional.
Motion. She's emotional. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Semaj Je'Taime, and we have another episode of Emotional Mondays. Clap it up, everyone. Clap it up. I have a very, very special guest with me today. I have my friend, Cyndirella, on the podcast today. First time being on the podcast. How you feeling?
Feel good. Feel ready.
Feel good? Black, blessed, highly favored.
Exactly. I wanted to be here. Black History Month.
So can you tell them a little bit about your background regarding this topic?
Yeah, of course. So I'm currently a junior at UNCC, but my senior year at UWC, United World College, I was certified with a Youth Mental Health First Aid Certificate. So that enables me to help provide information on how to access mental health, what mental health means, sexual education, how to have healthy sexual wellness, and also topics around sexual abuse. So I was certified in that, and I'm getting it renewed this year as well. But I just specialize typically towards sexual wellness and also substance use as well. Mm-hmm. So I was educated towards directing it around people around the ages from 8 up until like 25. So typically just like people in like late primary school up until like postgraduates of college. So yeah, it's kind of like my background. I was also an RA my freshman year of college and my senior year of high school at the boarding school I was working at. So I was actively just giving out the conversations. I did presentations for like my class. I did it targeted towards women and men as well. So I would hold a lot of forums on campus about it. And I also was a confidentiality RA, so people could come to me and just talk to me about their personal experiences, and I would keep it confidential and just advise them. So I'm obviously not like a professional, but I have a lot of experience in terms of like this topic in particular. So yeah.
You have a very, very spicy topic. It's not the normal topic to be discussing, especially between men and women. But you know, this is the Mr.Motion platform, so we're gonna always give y'all the real, the raw, the uncut, authentic conversations. So at the end of the day, we're all trying to evolve, we're all trying to better ourselves. But the topic that we have today stems around lust/porn addiction. And I know that a lot of us have gone through a phase, or maybe even still struggling with, you know, lust or porn addiction, especially in 2025 with things such as social media, with things such as having access to the internet, and just, I mean, people in colleges and whatnot. We have a very sexual society, especially in the United States. I just felt like it'd be a really great topic, especially with individuals that's coming to me and asking me about advice about how they have been struggling with this addiction and whatnot, and wanting some game about it. So yeah, I just want to dive deep into that. We're gonna start off with defining what lust addiction/porn addiction looks like in 2025. What is your definition?
I think definitely just having like a dependency on like the overconsumption of like sexual images and this instant gratification that comes from just fulfilling your sexual desires. I think it's normal to have like the sexual desires, but a pornography addiction is like a continuous cycle where in order to meet its dopamine effect for you to feel like fulfilled sexually, you have to consume like And it's like something that you can spend multiple hours doing, multiple times a day. Comes with a lot of side effects of like isolating yourself, feeling, I guess, like less intimate in interpersonal relationships as well because of that, maybe the shame or stigma. And I think also with lust is like this sort of objectification of women or men's bodies and seeing relationships as more sexual than actually for its like platonic or non-sexual in nature in a sense.
I want to get into where the lust addiction / porn addiction starts from or where it stems from. And I know in my experience how I got exposed to like, I guess, porn or just lust in general is very like young. Like I even say like cartoons, like where we have like very like sexualized, in my opinion, like sexualized like images of, they're just drawn in a way to where a lot like little me was just like, dang, like I'm like very attracted to that and whatnot. But also just having access to the internet and having older cousins that were already exposed to such things such as like porn or just having lustful thoughts and, you know, coming of age during like puberty and whatnot, and them exposing me to like sites such as like a Pornhub or a RedTube and those such things that got me exposed at like as early as I would say like maybe 10, 11 years old. Once I was hooked onto it, because once, you know, I had that feeling of this is how I can get my stress off, this is how I can get that dopamine, it became a daily thing for sure for me. But can you tell your perspective on like how you got introduced to that specific topic?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing is a lot of entertainment, because I grew up in a household where social media I didn't really have access to it until like high school in a sense. So I had to use like my mom or dad's devices, but a lot of it was just like watching TV and like you said, seeing exaggerated caricatures of like women and men and sexual innuendos. That was innuendo?
Yeah.
Like just like when they have the sexual references
Innuendos,
when they have these like jokes and references that maybe kids don't understand, but older audiences can understand in a sense. I think another thing as well is just, for me, it was like in middle school. I remember this one instance of, I was walking in the hallway with a couple of kids, and then this boy just randomly put on his phone and shows us porn. So like, that was something that like rewired my thinking. And I think also another thing is like a lack of sexual education.
Right.
Because kids are just naturally like, you know, curious, inquisitive, exactly. So just like kind of feeling like these hormonal changes in your body or this natural desire for something, but not knowing essentially where it's coming from. And if you don't have proper sexual education, then you're gonna go and seek it out on your own, especially if you're exposed to it in different ways. So I think for me, it was like a combination of all those elements. And I think just like answering questions of like how I'm feeling and where is it coming from. I think another aspect of it too is like, for me growing up in a religious household, sexual miseducation was also like the condemnation of sex. So kind of like seeking out that knowledge as well in a non-religious sense and just like trying to understand, but feeling a lot of shame and guilt in terms of having natural sexual desire. So then it became like a toxic kind of, you know, cycle being perpetuated in a sense.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And I want to get into specifically the reason why I made this video, because I know that my friend was telling me how he's in a like really great relationship right now, that, you know, everything's good, like he's a very God-fearing man and whatnot, but he would have instances where like whenever his partner isn't there, that he would have like, I guess, memories or like flashbacks of him like having like sex and whatnot, and it would essentially be the reason why he would either like masturbate or act on those like sexual desires. And he was telling me how that he truly does like wants to change, and he like feels like after he's done the deed essentially that he feels like bad, guilt-ridden himself. I think it really does like stem from obviously I know that like flesh is a thing, but I truly do believe that like your spirit like drives your flesh. And so I told him like, I think you have to like really get aligned on why you're doing it for. And the reasoning he gave me, it came down to two things, which was him feeling a little bit lonely, him feeling this void maybe in his relationship, or maybe because his partner wasn't there, but also the fact that he felt bored. It was out of boredom why he was doing such things, such as like masturbating and whatnot. Because once he finished, like let's say like a work day or whatnot, and he came back home, he had nothing else to do. So the best way to get that, I guess, that high or that dopamine was to, you know, act on like his sexual desires and pleasures and whatnot, and that's why he did it. Do you have like any experience with that, or do you know anyone that's had any experience with that, also like why they're actually doing it?
I think people like neglect the fact that women are also like naturally sexual beings. Like people, like men and women both have sexual attraction and sexual desire as well. And I think for me, just coming from Mitch's background, kind of like the stigma and fear around addressing the topic for me was like generally the education that I was surrounding myself when it came to sex, versus like it being education around like, you know, the biological process of it and how it affects women and men differently. And I think also just like that natural desire, you just want to have that dopamine or oxytocin, you want to feel that effect of feeling good. And it's something that like, I remember like being in middle school and like I was first exposed to it, I was just like looking into it, I was genuinely so just interested. But I think a form of experiencing sex without having to actually experience it for me personally and people that I know, just because that religious aspect of the sort of condemnation that comes with actually doing the deed versus watching it. So like I feel like in my head it was like a way to have my cake and eat it too in a sense. So it's like I'm not having to deal with the full consequences, but then it does come with those long-term consequences of like when you are in a position where you're supposed to have that natural intimacy, you then have like these unrealistic expectations of sex. And I feel like also it comes with self-deprecation like problems as well. Like a lot of people have self-image issues when it comes to how they see themselves when they're having sex, or even like performance issues because of pornography use long-term, and like lust as well.
So I want to go specifically into your thoughts on how like lust or porn addiction has affected relationships, especially like long-term relationships.
I think it's a good question. So I think the first thing is because people don't really think of addiction, first of all, in terms of something that could be like porn. We think of like substance abuse, we think of, you know, coffee or other forms of things that we overconsume. But I think the first and most important thing is understanding that porn addiction is like this dependency. In order to even feel sexual gratification or to feel sexual desire, you need to actually consume a large amount of porn in order to feel like that desire, which in our inherent nature we should be feeling just from, you know, pheromones and natural chemistry. So I think like you said there's the potential side effects.
Yeah.
I think like in a long-term relationship, the number one thing is like, I feel like the lack of maybe feeling connected to your partner.
Right.
Because I think that in relationships we tend to actually neglect like intimacy as like sexual and non-sexual. So maybe like prioritizing that sexual intimacy in order to feel like connection with your partner, when in actuality there should be a prioritization to focus on having friendship in that relationship, having like a sense of closeness, being able to like trust the person, have respect for them. And I think that it begins to kind of overpower the non-sexual forms of intimacy, the desire to feel close to your partner. And I think that's what kind of separates, I feel like, lust and love in a relationship, because lust is so short-term, whereas like love is like a long-term commitment that you make to a person. And that kind of, I feel like it more encompasses like friendship than that sexual intimacy in a sense. But I feel like the long-term side effects, besides that lack of like true intimacy, just like self-image issues as well. You know, because if you're watching these porn videos that make you see sex in a particular manner, it makes you see like sex as a means of maybe a way of like dressing up or cosplaying or conforming to the sexual standard or societal standard of what beauty looks like as well. Because then we're seeing women that have these like exaggerated proportions. We're seeing these different like aspects of like role playing, or like these titles of like stepdaughter, stepdad, which is a little bit crazy. I can't lie.
No, that's
It's a little bit crazy. But besides that, like, you have these unrealistic expectations in the bedroom when sex is something that's people are at their most vulnerable state. You are with your full insecurities, you have your stretch marks, you have your full body that is connected to you, and you also have access to another person's body. There's a form of intimacy and the rawness of seeing someone versus expecting them to have this perfect image.
Right.
And then also I think it affects sexual performance. People don't realize when you have a porn addiction, besides the unrealistic expectations, it makes you like nervous, or it can make you feel uncomfortable when you're having sex, so then you're not able to actually enjoy the intimate moment you're sharing with that person.
Right.
And it also comes with like just body issues as well. I feel like for me being a woman, I think just with the objectification of women in the porn industry altogether, I feel like I'm expected to have a certain body type or portray myself in a particular way when having something that intimate with a person. So I think that's just like kind of my personal experiences and my perception of it.
Yeah, I most definitely agree with that. And I would add on to that by saying that it definitely, growing up, warped my perception of what sex is and how it does look like. Because I know growing up, I would see videos all the time of, like you said, like this perfect image of like women with like this particular type of size of her breast or her butt or whatnot. But also like as a 10-year-old kid seeing like a man, seeing that this guy has like this, you know, like man got like 10, 12 inches or whatnot, and he's lasting for like an hour or so and not realizing this guy probably is on like pills or like medication that like puts him in that position. I know that growing up I was like, dang man, like you said, I would feel self-conscious about having sex, and it'd be more so about the validation of I need to make sure that this woman is, you know, she's able to, you know, I guess, or like climax or whatnot, rather than having like that, like you said, the actual intimacy of the act. It was more so about like, if I can make her do this, or if I can like go up to my guys and tell them like, yeah, like I had sex with her and I made her do this or do that, rather than the actual like you said, like the intimacy of the particular act, for sure.
I think it's a really good point too. I think that also intersects into, I guess, like just the generalization of how we see sexual pleasure. Then you like begin to assume that people all like sexual pleasure in a particular manner,
right?
You know,
right.
Versus like learning that person individually and what their needs are. Because some people like they don't have sexual attraction unless it's like coordinated with a mental attraction, and they call that a demisexual. So someone that needs to be stimulated mentally. And like sapiosexual, someone needs to be stimulated intellectually before they can even have that sexual connection. So I think it's just important to like learn the individual and what their actual preferences are, and that not everyone needs that sexual stimulation in a relationship. Some people are also asexual. That's another topic. But I think something that I wanted to bring up was kind of the violence of the porn industry as well. I don't think people actually realize how big this issue is. I've seen a stat online that 25% of all Google searches are actually porn related. So 1/4 of the internet is being used for porn. So that's a very big thing that impacts a lot of people. And not only does it put a lot of children at risk because it's a form of miseducation when it comes to actually what sex is, it also like perpetuates this violence against women and men, because we see a lot of these ideas being perpetuated in the sex industry about how women should be treated instead of like learning the individual nature of the person. And a lot of people are also being abused or neglected in the porn industry. And we see there's a lot of women and men that have like left that industry and suffered the long-term consequences of having like the most intimate part of themselves on the internet readily available. Like Mia Khalifa, she's an example of someone that's trying to move forward in her life,
right? But
she got her citizenship revoked from her home country because of her how much her porn blew up. And even now, like it's something that people constantly mention, and she can't really move forward in her other anticipated careers. So I think it's like a lot of violence, and also how people perpetuate like sexual violence in a sense. Because I heard a lot of people, like a lot of my friends personally that have been with partners that have a struggle with a porn addiction, that also see women as simply like they kind of objectify women in a sense and see them as a means to just gain pleasure. You kind of lose the essence of what it's like to actually have that relationship. And seeing sex as something that's a means just to gain something from a person rather than something that's very intimate. You're engaging with another person, and you're exchanging these, not even each other's bodies, you're exchanging energy. I actually believe too, like in soul ties, like you have access to a person's spirit. Like sex is very vulnerable in raw form.
So I want to specifically ask, and I'll talk about it first, if sex or like porn addiction or just I guess lust addiction has affected the way you view the opposite gender. And for me, more so, I guess like watching porn, it makes me like just have a more like I guess sexual image of when I see women like pass by or whatnot. So I say like in the past, right, like if I see like somebody walk by me like a woman, I go into thinking about like her butt is fat, or like she bad, like she's sexy or something like that. And I don't really like see the person for just being just like a person or whatnot. And I think that does like start from like watching porn and actually like objectifying like I guess women in a sense. So those are just my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I I think for me, just feeling a bit disconnected from the actual nature of sex. And just kind of, I'm seeing it more as something that's like, you know, that instant gratification from watching porn, and seeing the opposite gender as a means to like fulfill that, you know, with that objectification. And I think that applies to just like social media as well. Like I would just be seeing a bunch of fine men, I'm like, they look good, you know what I mean? But it doesn't like allow me to fully consider like the full personalization of that person.
Right.
What are their desires? What are their dreams? What are things that inspired them? So just seeing people as more so in this like sexual transactional nature, like also what can they do for me in a sense. I think also going back to objectification, I think I've found a time period where I found it hard for me to even want to interact with men that I'm not even really attracted to. Like I began to like devalue friendships in a sense. You know what I mean? Just a little bit. So I think sometimes people can have that experience because that goes in coordination with the sort of isolation that pornography brings. It's not even like a physical isolation because you could spend hours isolating yourself, but like you can feel like mentally isolated around people that care about you or people that are sharing their company with you as well. So, and I think that applies to like opposite gender and same gender as well.
Right.
So just feeling like kind of like mentally isolated.
So how do you specifically like handle like triggers? I would say like, let's say that you're like sitting in a room, you're bored, maybe you see like someone that you're attracted to or something that just kind of just triggers that moment of I need to like pleasure myself or I need to fall into my sexual desires. How do you handle that moment of weakness and get yourself out of that predicament?
That's a great question. I think I can't even say self-control because I feel like I'm a person that am particularly like disciplined. But I think for me just being Christian is definitely like combating it with, you know, just the wisdom of God for me. Because I do think that when it comes down to the idea of lust, it's not a problem to have sexual desire, but it becomes a problem when it's all you want to do is like in your free time, it's all you want to consume. So like whenever I'm in those moments of when I do want to watch porn, I want to be lustful, just remembering that like I can like pivot that interest into other things. So for me, I like to paint, or I'll like read my word, I'll watch sermons, even praying and spending time with God, and just finding something that feels fulfilling, but in a different way. And I think also addressing the issue. Like I don't think that trying to have that personal shame and condemning yourself is the way to address it, but first acknowledging that I have this problem, it impacts me like this, and I need to figure out a way that I can really acknowledge where where it's first coming from, and B, how it impacts me, and see how to move forward from it. And I think for me, I also have one of my accountability partners because walking with Christ, talk about like having fellowship. Like my best friend, me and her we talk about these things because even though it's a difficult conversation, like having someone you can share that information with is so pivotal to you, like moving forward from that addiction and healing from it. So like having that accountability partner and be like, hey, I'm struggling in this moment right now, let me just call you, because if I don't call you, it's gonna be that. And if I don't do that, it might be masturbation, it might be even like just thinking about the pornographic images that I've like kind of remembered over time in my head. Because I feel like I even had that problem where even though I wasn't actively watching it, I could remember vivid pornographic images like that would just be in my head. So just trying to find ways to kind of just clear my
that fog.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, most definitely. And I totally agree with everything you said. Especially like you just have to be transparent with yourself and be accountable to yourself. So if you know like, okay, whenever I go into the bathroom with my phone, I tend to, you know, masturbate. I tend to like fall into those desires. So things that I've done personally is like I leave my phone like in my room whenever I go to the shower or whenever I go to the bathroom, because I know that I don't want to compromise, put myself in a position to fall into those desires. And that could be the same thing of just like blocking someone that you previously had sexual relations with. Like if you know that this person has access to me and this person is on this type of timing, then why even like entertain the fact that they have this access to me? Because you could eventually, they could hit you up, you could hit them up, and something could happen, and now you're starting, you know, you don't fall into the desires. So really just being intentional and minimizing falling into the desires by doing the little things, such as I know I don't need to have my phone, maybe I need to put like a ad blocker or like a text blocker, so a website blocker, so I don't fall into watching like a Pornhub or a RedTube. So that's something I would say, but also like I said, be transparent. I'm Christian, so whenever I have the desires, first thing I do, I get on my knees and I talk to God, and God already knows what you're about to do. God already knows that you have these thoughts, so you might as well be transparent. You might as well like pray. You might as well be as honest as possible, as authentic as possible, because sometimes saying it out loud can really like reassure you, like, okay, I know I have a goal, I know I'm on a mission, and I don't need to fall into these desires, because keeping in your head, that's where things can get very wicked. Also, like you said, fellowship, making sure that you have an accountability partner, making sure that if this issue persists, that like my homeboy did, like he could call me and talk to me about it. If your homeboy or your homegirl come to you about it, don't make them feel shame about it, and don't entertain it. Don't put them in position to where you're saying like, you're talking about like me and my gal, or me and my man, you know, we do it every single day, and you just kind of just exposing this person into like your life, your sexual life, knowing that like they can fall, they easily could fall back into doing those types of things, especially if they have a void in their life. So it's just being very intentional in how you approach it, how you want to combat it, and knowing that you can combat it. You have to make it heard out loud first, I would say. Yeah. My experience.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, you can add on to that.
Okay. So I was just thinking about like the whole idea of temptation. That was a really good thing you were talking about. I think also limiting your temptation. Like if you know that something stimulates or provokes you to want to be lustful, or to watch porn, or even to hit up someone that you have your sneaky link with, or whatever sexual interaction you have that's not healthy, is like limiting those factors. Just knowing probably shouldn't watch maybe this show because this show is a very over sexualized show, or maybe I shouldn't read these certain things or listen to certain things, or even music. People like neglect the fact that music perpetuates a lot of like sexuality. We're talking about smashing people in music, getting women. We're talking about how literally wet dreams. J. Cole, I love J. Cole, but that song is just about his first experience with a woman. So like there's this sort of familiarity and glorification, this sexuality and sensuality in a lot of our like old music and current music, that if you know that it kind of provokes you, because I have like friends that like their love language is also music. So if you know that it provokes a sort of sensuality, then limit that kind of secular music or sexual music. Replace it with, for me, I love like gospel music. I've been getting more into that, and also music that's clean or not as sexualized. Find something that music is perpetuating and healthier conversations. So yeah, just like limiting those temptations, and also surrounding yourself with people that are gonna hold you accountable, but also encourage you in other interests as well. Like it's not to be necessarily like only for like people that are religious, or if you need like a fellowship group, but for some people that are not as religious, just like getting into understanding maybe the psychology of where desires are coming from. I think for me too, like something that's worked for me to kind of like just combat that pornography addiction is, for me, like I have to search up stuff. Where does pornography addiction come from? What are the actual side effects? Like how does this impact relationships? Just understanding the true like human psychology behind why we do things.
Right.
Because the best way to combat miseducation is by educating yourself. And people neglect the fact that sexual education is a necessity. And it goes beyond like the biological processes of explaining it, but the actual inherent nature behind it. And I love teaching like my younger cousins and things about consent culture, about being aware of your body, and just being comfortable exploring things in a very healthy way. So it doesn't mean you have to actually inherently do something sexually, but it's important for you to kind of understand maybe where your desires are coming from, things that are tempting it, and if you want to have that in a healthy way, just having a lot of education around how to have those healthy boundaries. I think also like people neglect the fact that children are very inquisitive. Like from a young age, it's like where it has to start with that sexual education, because then it becomes a thing you have to combat with and deal with later when you're an adult, and when you have to deal with life, deal with being in school, deal with working. So I think it's really important to start from a young age, that education around sex.
Yeah, most definitely. And for parents, it can't be a taboo topic to talk about, because you are having your kids coming into a world where, you know, sex sells and sex is such a prominent thing within our society, especially in the United States. So it's best to give those, you know, I guess those uncomfortable, difficult conversations and lay them all out at the forefront, because you don't want to put your kids in positions to where like they're having to navigate this all on their own, which can lead them into, you know, some places where they didn't necessarily have to be if they just had those conversations earlier on. I might have to let you do it by yourself one time.
I'm like, y'all, Mr.Motion is sick, so I'm covering for him today. You let me cover for you, Mommy?
Yeah, you can do that.
They gonna be like,
We don't like her.
No. Like, where's Mr. Motion? So I think another thing that people don't tend to actually address is kind of this unspoken shame and stigma around people that have been maybe sexually abused. This is a disclaimer, by the way. Maybe like dealt with a little bit of sexual abuse or like misconduct when they're younger. And that's led to kind of like this sort of hypersexuality that these people are like just participating more in sex as well, but also over-consuming porn as a means to, you know, like cope with the trauma. And that's something that I know a lot of people personally that have experienced it. And there's also a topic around, I don't know the exact name for it, but it's like child molestation. Like, you know, a lot of kids that play house or get involved in, the kids are very inquisitive that like,
right,
you know, do things with their cousins or whatever. Like, it's just a thing that I think specifically a lot of like ethnic homes, because there's a lot of sexual misconduct, a lot of kids are curious and try things with other children that parents may not be aware of, and that can lead to like the heightened issues of hypersexuality and that porn usage over time. I think because it's so like there's so much shame around it, it's hard to actually address it. And shame is actually like the number one emotion that perpetuates a lot of psychological stress. That's a fact. So if you don't address that shame behind maybe where the sexual addiction came from, if you were abused or something, it's hard for you to actually move forward in a healthy way from it. So I think you have to just kind of really understand the root cause of why you got into maybe being lustful or being hypersexual or even having that pornography addiction, because then it's hard to figure out like the true stimulus of where it came from. Yeah, at least for me, like I come from like, you know, African background, so there was a lot of stigma around the sexual abuse, but it's actually really common. Like I know a lot of people and that have been like sexually abused, but not even from like adults, and people that are relatively our age. They're like exploring stuff like by playing house or doing things from a young age, and then that leads to them either having like this fear of sex or them being hypersexual. And I think even the fear of sex is not even a healthy thing, because we don't want it to be a thing that people are not also able to have healthy sexual experiences. And I think that's like important to think about, because even though I'm a Christian that practice celibacy, I think it's important to see sex in a healthy way, because it's something that is a natural human desire. Aside from procreation, it's kind of its intended purpose as well, is that it's a way to connect with people, and it should be done in a healthy manner with education around your impact on that person and their impact on you, and understanding like how your body's affected by that, your mental psychological processes, and then also having healthy sex, aside from it like being non-violent and respectful and having consent, also understanding like, you know, STIs and STD prevention as well. So y'all stay safe and stay educated.
So I want to ask specifically, what is some advice that you would give someone that's currently struggling with this addiction and needs maybe some habits, productive habits that they can include into their lives in order to stop this addiction?
It's a really good question. So I think the most important thing is also having a healthy habit. I think the first thing is to be able to address the fact that you struggle with the issue and just try to pinpoint maybe where it's coming from. And you won't know immediately. Sometimes you have to sit with it for a while and be like, okay, I'm dealing with issues of lust because I don't feel this sort of maybe companionship with other people. It's a way of like maybe validating something within myself that like I don't see within my self-image. So I think the first thing of like building healthy habits around it is like normalizing and destigmatizing the conversation. I know it's a lot to like reach out to other people and talk about it openly, so it's just starting that with yourself. For me, I would love to journal, I like to pray about it too. And if you have like a really close friend, I feel like if you really try to speak to that person that you know will not judge you, it allows for you to relieve that stress and shame, because the shame is the thing that keeps perpetuating you to go back to addiction.
Right.
You know, it's like a continuous cycle. You have the high dopamine, oxytocin, then it drops. You have like the sort of post-nut clarity or post-like realization after you orgasm or after you feel these heightened senses, and then you feel shame immediately after. And I feel like breaking the shame is the most healthiest habit to break the addiction and to address it. So having an accountability partner and having things that occupy your time, because when you are busy, you don't have as much free time. If you're a person that like goes to porn for out of pure boredom, you don't have as much free time to do those things. So finding like hobbies that actually perpetuate growth within yourself. So it could be like reading self-help books, it could be drawing, and also I feel like getting offline. Being online perpetuates so much this like glorification of sex. So if you have to stop watching certain movies that provoke certain ideas and images of sex, cut out your TV time, cut out your social media time, and have intentional time that's offline, that you're actually enjoying other people's company or your own company. Because I mean, also pornography is online. So if you cut off your time off your phone or your devices, you can't reach it immediately.
Right.
And also just having an environment that also does not tempt you, like I said earlier in the video. So like the healthy habits is also having that sort of discipline and not allowing certain people to also influence you. So if you know that you have a friend that maybe has more open ideas around sex, you can still, of course, be friends with that person, but just make it clear, make that boundary with them. Be like, hey, I'm, trying to like desexualize my environment. I would appreciate maybe if we didn't talk so much about this topic, or if you have experiences that it would be in a way that is not like glorifying it, is
right.
struggling with it. So just being honest and transparent about where you're at. And if you're not able to do that, then maybe just like limiting your interactions with that environment in a sense. So yeah.
What a great answer. Good job. What would you say to someone that may feel helpless, hopeless, like they can't get out of the situation?
That you're not alone, and a lot of people feel like that. And it's actually like one of the most common addictions, and if not the most stigmatized addiction, I feel like, in the world. And that it's okay to struggle with it, but it's even better for you to try to find ways to get out of it. So I think the first thing is just kind of addressing the issue within yourself and just being really raw and vulnerable and transparent with what you're struggling with. Especially when it comes to, I think, speaking to women, is knowing that like it's not foreign, or it's not, I guess, like disorders, there's no disgust or shame in having sexual desires, but it's important to have it in a healthy and safe space. So I think that's like my advice for anyone, is just to first, it's like deal with the shame of it, and to know that other people are struggling with it as well. And that's the first step in moving forward and healing from that addiction, is to address it and destigmatize it. Also, it's very much a continuous journey. So it's not something that's gonna happen overnight. You might have a period of time where you're not gonna be actively engaging it, but you might be like mentally tempted, and just to stay strong, have accountability partners, and if you fall back into it, don't be hard on yourself, or hold yourself to that hard standard, but just keep trying to find ways to move forward. It's a journey, and it's not focusing on the destination, but more so on embracing the journey of healing and moving forward. And also like mentally equipping yourself to deal with those things in the future. So just like strengthening your mental adversity. Just but I know who I am, I'm strong enough to fight this addiction, and I know I am a valuable person, and I cannot perpetuate personally to this dehumanization and devaluation of sex, because I see it in a higher value, because I'm also a high value person. Just like affirming yourself to get out of that addiction is really important.
So I'm very curious to hear from a woman's perspective, like, how has porn as a woman affected the way, like, your perspective on like sex and men in general?
It's a great question. I think because in the porn industry that women are kind of dehumanized or objectified, I think unintentionally seeing like my role as like something that I have to kind of perpetuate this sort of like submissiveness or fulfill these unrealistic ideas or expectations like in a sexual manner, instead of just being like just raw, vulnerable, and intimate. I think it's, for me being a woman too, also like a lot of my self-image was like impacted by that as well. And I was thinking that I had to have a particular body, maybe a particular way of portraying myself in order to be seen as sexually desirable. You know, and even the way that I dress, it would affect the way that I had this time period, like my senior year, it's like my freshman year of college, where I felt like I only could feel sexy, I could only feel empowered if I'm dressed to the male gaze, or like in a sense being validated by male attention, you know? And then a lot of it too was like feeling a bit objectified. Like it would be at like points where I would feel a lot of contradiction in my emotions because I would feel like I'm being kind of objectified by men, but at the same time I'm putting myself in a position where I'm seeking their validation. You know, the mini skirts, the crop tops, and how I would like go out to parties just trying to be seen intentionally by men. And I think also like because women can be maybe a bit judgy, I felt a lot of like social isolation and disapproval from a lot of women that are simply more modest or didn't like subscribe to the validation of men. And it even goes like into how women present themselves, because I feel like I wouldn't do certain hairstyles or certain makeup or things that were expressive to like who I am, because I wanted to be seen as sexy and desirable to the male gaze. And I was seeing these things in, not even in porn, but on social media. You would see influencers, you would see all these dating and reality shows at women that have this particular body, particular hairstyle, particular makeup, and how the way that they present themselves as more sexual, as more irresistible. Just like I just wanted to feel like desirable, and I feel like I kind of made that like the foundation of my womanhood was like this desirability as well, especially being a Black woman. So just trying to find ways that I was desirable would make me feel like I could fit or involve in an environment. Because sometimes like the unfortunate truth to being a Black woman is that you're dealing with the intersection of desirability politics, like having to feel like you get treated better when you look better, when you look like people with particular types. Like I would notice that when I have my hair done a particular way, when I dress a particular way, when I have makeup a particular way, people will respect me or interact with me in a different manner, you know? And I think that all inherently came from not even just porn, but like a combination of social media, of music, that just would, and even entertainment that perpetuates like this sort of beauty standard that comes with sexualization of women. Because not even just like the beauty standard itself, I feel like in the West, is heavily intertwined with the glorification and justification of women's bodies. Like those two are very intertwined, you know? So yeah, I think that's how it impacted like my womanhood in a sense. And I think that I didn't really understand the importance of true intimacy in a relationship. I feel like I had to kind of perform this idea of like my sexuality in order for my partner to actually like me. And I feel like now I've like deconstructed it over time. I'm able to be authentically myself and find ways of my sexuality, my sensuality incorporated with my individuality and who I am.
Damn, you're killing this. Last question. Do you think that full recovery with porn addiction or with lust addiction is possible? And what does that process look like?
I think anything is absolutely possible, but you have to focus on embracing the journey. That's with any addiction, but specifically with porn, I think it's understanding the impacts of it on yourself. And I feel like for me, just in terms of moving forward, the most important thing that I had to do was destigmatize it. I had to break the stigma and the shame behind it and know that I am not devalued because of the fact that I'm struggling with this thing. I'm a person that still carries value, and I still have the right to have these healthy and safe sexual experiences, but also still feel like respected in the process, just even though I'm struggling with this thing. I think that the first thing too is like having those conversations with people that you care about, because in order for you to move forward and for it to be long term, I think a big part of it is having accountability. And you can only really break the shame if you have people that also hold you accountable as well. I think that's the unfortunate truth. Like nobody wants to hear that, but for a lot of addiction, like you even have like, you know, the double A, what are those groups called, y'all? The circles where people like get together and talk about like, their alcohol addiction.
Oh, you're talking about the double A meetings?
Yeah, double A meetings. So like having that, but for like your lust and porn addiction, you don't have to have like a whole community of people. It could be just one person. Having a space to talk about it And having that shared sense of community is really important, because community also helps give you the strength to move forward when you don't have it personally. So you can't count on only yourself to help you move forward from that addiction if you don't have accountability partners and people that genuinely love you and see you as you despite what you're dealing with, that are also like helping you move forward from that. And I think for me, like, I shout out to my best friend because she's someone that I can be 100% honest with, and I can just tell her when I'm struggling with things. And instead of feeling shame and stigma, I feel like a sort of like comfort, and I felt seen and validated because she could see that I was struggling with the issue. I think that also is important. You have people that are working with you to fight the issue and are not working against you or working against the issue.
Right.
But yeah, anything is possible moving forward. I think also understanding that it's a journey, and that if you have a problem if you have a situation where you relapse in a sense, that you don't hold it against yourself, but you're able to let it go and move forward. And it's important, especially if you're in your 20s, is that you're gonna endure so many mistakes in your life. You need to just learn as you go and let them go. Like, learn the lessons and let them go. And this is one of those things too, is like trying to foresee your identity and the future you without a porn addiction as well. Like, start looking forward to things that are not inherently as sexualized, you know? And also find ways to re-own your sexuality. I think for me, I'm someone that loves dancing, and I recently started doing major dancing, but find ways to express that sexuality in a healthy way that's not immediately intertwined with this over-sexualization that we're seeing in our world. So you have to re-own your sexuality and sensuality in a way that feels respectful and safe to you.
No, you killed that. I feel like you killed that. But yeah, a lot of knowledge, a lot of games dropped, a lot of gems were dropped. I want to cut it out, man. Very much came in clutch for this video, because I'm not gonna lie, y'all, this was a very vulnerable conversation. Do I want to talk about this? But then I was like, man, I might as well talk about this, because at the end of the day, we're looking for everyone to grow, we're looking for everyone to evolve, and we got to have these hard conversations in order to do that. So I'm so appreciative that Cyndirella came here and gave y'all some gems. I hope I was able to provide some insight as well. Man, this is a really great conversation. I felt like I got so much out of what you said throughout this whole conversation, throughout this time. So like I said, I want to thank you again. This was awesome. So yeah, make sure you guys scan the QR code that's up there. That's the Discord. We're starting to get very active on the Discord, so please join the Discord. Follow the social medias. We are Mr.Motion at We Are Mr.Motion on all social medias. Like, subscribe, comment, and share the videos. And yeah, I hope you guys got something out of this, because yes, this was very insightful. So yeah, with that all being said, this is the Emotional Mondays podcast series on the Mr.Motion platform. I'm your host, Semaj Je'Taime, and I have Cyndirella on the platform. And yeah, Motion out. Peace.